Hi, Celia.
Hi, Holly.
Today I want to talk about anxiety and teenagers, and specifically how to empower your teen with top tricks to treat and tackle anxiety head on.
Okay, I could use those. I have two teens that have anxiety.
As do I. So, according to recent studies, 1 in 3 teenagers suffer from chronic anxiety.
This does not surprise me.
I know it's not surprising, but the number is staggering. This is a topic that when we grew up, no one talked about. This was not a topic.
If it was happening, no one seemed to care. We are Gen X and we basically raised ourselves, is
Right,
what the story on the street is.
right.
But all kidding aside, mental health wasn't a focus.
I mean, back then, when people mentioned therapy, it was sort of in hushed whispers. And if you went to therapy, you might hide it, not talk to people about it.
Right.
And now in this current generation, a lot of kids are in therapy already. And I think that one of the other statistics I was reading is that it afflicts mostly girls. I don't know why. Who knows why that is? But the majority are girls, although, of course, boys also are
My
experiencing it.
son, yeah, my son has had it since preschool, probably before that.
So is it any wonder though? These kids they're under more pressure than any other generation before because they're watched, they're being watched, they're on every social media channel. They are constantly checking their phones and all of these things are like a constant reminder in front of their face day in and day out. So while there's no getting rid of social media, I'm certainly beyond that with my kids. They're too old to say, "Hey, you can't do social media anymore." We didn't know. We didn't know.
I think we kind of knew phones weren't the best thing. And we were starting to hear about how social media, particularly with girls, was affecting them. But it seems like more and more information is now coming out. So I don't think we should be too hard on ourselves
Right.
about what we did. But if I were to do it again, I would never have given my daughter a phone when I did, and certainly not let her be on social media.
Absolutely. 100%. That's part of this video, right? We've done things wrong and
Oh, many, many things. Not you said some. I thought you said one. Some, many.
many we've done many things wrong, but so did our parents, so did their parents before them, and the next generation of parents will continue to do wrong things. But that's just human nature. We're doing the best we can. By the way, if you're watching this far in, please subscribe and like. Okay, moving on. So, I'm going to talk about some tools that I think can be helpful before anyone approaches medication. And I personally am medicated, and one of my daughters is medicated.
I too am medicated, and that happened during perimenopause for me. And I do medicate my son. I did try therapy with him starting in fourth grade, and we did a year of therapy, and nothing was helping. And the therapist and I came to the realization that perhaps he wasn't able to even work on, I think, some of the skills you're going to talk about until his whole system was calmed down.
Mm,
So that's why we did medication for him as young as we did. There should be no judgment either way. Of course, yeah, ideally you start without doing that, but medication has a time and a purpose, and it can be super helpful.
it absolutely can. And with one of my daughters, the one who is medicated, we also did not do medication for her until she had been in therapy for years. And she had a big panic attack. And that was sort of a turning point for us when we felt like we had to seek greater, stronger help in the form of medication. So, what can we do? What should we do? The first one I would like to call out is we need to listen. We ask, we hear them, we're there for them. Be an active listener. So rather than giving them advice, unwarranted advice, unless they're asking for it, the biggest thing is to just listen rather than solve.
Yeah, and I would add that's a great time to practice reflective listening, which is basically telling them back what you just heard.
Okay.
No advice. You're simply saying, so it sounds like what you're saying is da 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 da. And then they can say, well, yeah, sort of, but also this. So it really opens up the pathways for communication. It's hard to do and it takes practice,
Yeah.
especially as mothers.
Mm.
We've talked about this in a previous video. We just want to get in there and fix.
Yeah.
I just want to fix it all up with words. And
Like,
unfortunately, that doesn't work.
I mean, that sounds like what happens in therapy.
Yes. Oh my God. Therapists do it all the time.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense that you have to have a degree to do that.
Yeah. To be good at it.
Exactly. And number 2 is to normalize. We know now that anxiety is prevalent. We also know that everyone on the planet, probably, maybe that's overstating, but almost everyone has experienced anxiety at some point. So kids should know that it's normal to feel anxiety, and maybe that makes them feel less scared about it. And it also shows them that we have empathy if we're saying, oh my gosh, I have anxiety when this happens or that happens, and your father has it, and your aunt has it, or whatever it is. Normalizing it, I think, can really help the child to sort of accept that part of them and know that it's not weird or scary. It's just normal.
It is literally part of our biological makeup. The flight, fight, freeze is what, when we were hunters and gatherers,
Hmm.
had our species survive.
Right.
So that's what's happening with your body a lot of times with anxiety,
Mhm.
and recognizing it for that, and then knowing what to do based on those feelings is really important.
Number 3 for me is maybe the hardest one, and it's probably hard for all parents, but don't rescue them. We wanna save them from stressful situations, we wanna save them from feeling sad, but saving them from a stressful situation means telling them in some way that they can't do it. It will mentally create a block for them. Like, "Oh, if I'm being rescued, I probably shouldn't be in this situation." But instead, remind them of times where they've pushed through anxiety and how rewarding that is on the other side.
And if you can get through it, what happens on the other side is they feel empowered, they feel more self confident. It is very hard to do as a parent because I agree with you. We don't want to see our kids uncomfortable. And when we feel like we know a way to get them through it quicker or have them avoid it, we do want to jump in. But my fear for our kids' generation is that they are going to be entering real life with no real life skills. And this is very concerning to me.
Absolutely. So, number 4 is sleep and self-care, which is kind of obvious, but it's just one of the things that we can make sure that our kids are doing is caring for themselves. Because as we know, our kids they're under a lot of pressure at school and, socially, academically. And so to have sleep and just to know that they are as well equipped emotionally as possible.
I think sleep is so critical. I know when my daughter doesn't get sleep, I literally, before my eyes, she loses coping skills. Like, I'm like, bye bye, coping skills. And then I'll tell her, kiddo, you need sleep. You need a good night's sleep. And of course, she doesn't associate any of what's happening with her, what she's saying, or how she's melting down to sleep. And in addition to that, one of my son's first psychiatrists spent an inordinate amount of time with him, with us, working on making sure that he was getting that REM sleep.
Mm,
And that without that foundation of sleep, all the other work we were going to try and do with him was not going to work. That was like the foundation of a house. Like without that, nothing's happening.
right. And I think just showing your kids that you have also healthy routines, I think is important. If they see you going to bed at a certain time and they see you eating healthily and they see you exercising and they see you doing yoga, so even if they don't participate in all these things, they'll see it and we're modeling that behavior. And I think that there's great value in that. Number 5 is encourage outlets. They need to have some sort of outlet just for themselves, whether that's writing, exercising, drawing, knitting, reading, getting out in nature, you name it. It can be anything. something that allows them to focus outside of themselves. And maybe it's even something they can do when they're in the midst of feeling anxiety, something that pulls them out of it and refocuses their energy into a more positive, productive way.
Yeah, I think that it's worth putting on the description below a list of skills that are associated with DBT and dealing with anxiety specifically. So, my son has done a lot of DBT, dialectical behavior therapy.
Okay.
And when he is in the heat of flight, right? Flight, flight, or freeze, he goes into flight a lot. He puts his head under cold water, and that just brings the whole nervous system down. But DBT does have a whole list of things that you can do or have your kid try and do and see what works for him. And we'll have a link to that below.
That sounds great. Absolutely. Think I need to stick my head under some cold water
Well, then we
sometime.
have to redo our hair. And so, no, that would cause us more stress. But maybe there's things with ice cubes. I forget what those are, but
Okay.
maybe that's more our speed.
We'll look that up. So, number 6 is therapy. Therapy is a key component. And you don't even have to do all these things before you go to therapy because therapy is going to give you tools no matter what. I think therapy is always a good idea. And CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy gives you coping mechanisms to learn proactive steps every day to make you feel better.
And I would just add to the therapy that I think my son is on his fifth therapist. I think we've nailed it this time. But don't expect that the first one out is going to be a match for your kid. And depending on their age, let them navigate that and tell you if they're feeling a connection or not. Because what I have found is if there is no connection, you're wasting time and money.
They won't talk to them, they won't communicate. I personally in my life I remember one time where I think I went through 5 different therapists to find the right one, and I was so tired of telling my story over and over.
Oh,
But it's worth it when you get that person that you connect with because there's going to be a trust there if you connect with them, and it's no different for children. You can't force them into talking to someone because they won't. They will just shut down.
and it's very different than talking to a parent. A therapist brings an unbiased opinion. They're really there to listen to your kid. So if the match is good, I believe 100% in talk therapy.
Absolutely.
And just one other thought with medication and anxiety is that what I've learned, if there's any kind of suicidal ideation or self-harm or any of these more scary things, you definitely want to be talking to a therapist and or psychiatrist, because that I do think is when medication can potentially be helpful, but you really need to attack it from all directions.
Because there are so many side effects also. You don't really know until you're trying these medications. It unfortunately it may take trying 2 to 5 different kind of medications to find the right one, and the side effects can be scary. They can actually exacerbate the anxiety.
Yeah, and know that it takes a lot of time because most of these medications take 2 to 6 weeks to work, and then if
Yeah.
they're not working, you have to titrate down before you can try something else. So it's a lengthy process, and of course, you just want your kid to feel better, and you're scared as it is because you're putting them on medication, you're not sure how you feel about that.
Mhm.
So it's a lot.
Yeah, by
But
the time you get to that, you're desperate
yes.
to help them, and then
Mhm.
to learn that it's gonna be another month to 6 weeks before they might feel better is
Right.
really a tough pill to swallow, pun intended.
Pun intended. And we are talking about teens
Yeah.
who are in puberty and their bodies are changing, their hormone levels are changing. It's a very difficult time to figure out all this stuff and medicate, and it's tough. It's very tough.
We could talk for a long time on
We
this
could
topic,
we
and
could
maybe we
probably
will. Maybe there will be another one maybe we'll make it a series. We'll see.
Mhm.
Well, thank you, Celia,
Thanks, Holly.
and please subscribe and like. We really appreciate you watching. Bye.
Bye-bye.